Chapter 9, Samson, the 12th and last judge of Israel. The birth of Samson. Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. Judges 13 verse 1. Zorah was one of the 14 cities in the lowland of Judah that was allotted to the tribe of Dan. Joshua 15 verse 33, 1941. Manoah, a certain man from Zorah, and of the family of the Danites, had a wife who was barren and had no children. The angel of the Lord visited Manoah's wife, just as he had visited Abraham's wife, and he told her that she would bear a son. He gave her instructions to be careful not to drink wine or similar drink. She was not to eat anything unclean, for she was going to conceive and bear a son. No razor was to come upon his head, that is, his hair was never to be cut. The child was going to be a Nazirite to God from her womb. He would be the one to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. Judges 13 verses 2 to 5. The promised son of Manoah and his wife was going to be separated and consecrated to the Lord from her womb. Vows were normally made to the Lord taken by the person making the vow, but Manoah's son to come will already be consecrated to the Lord on his mother's vow before he is born. John the Baptist was also a Nazirite. Although not explicitly quoted, it was implied. An angel came to Zacharias to give him a message that his wife Elizabeth, who was barren, was to bear him a son. He was going to be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb. Before John's birth, it was known that he would be great in the sight of the Lord, and he was to drink neither wine nor strong drink. Strong drink is a spirit, and this spirit would not be of God. If John did drink, he would be controlled by that spirit and not the Holy Spirit. The same thing could happen to the woman's son if she drank strong drink. She would open a door to a bad spirit, and that spirit would control the boy's future instead of the Holy Spirit. The woman said to her husband Manoah, "A man of God came to me, and his countenance of the angel of God, very awesome, but I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name, and he said to me, Behold, you will conceive and bear a son. Now drink no wine or similar drink, do not eat anything unclean, for the child will be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death." We know from our journey through the Bible so far, that the angel of the Lord was no other than the divine, the Lord Jesus himself. Manoah believed his wife, and the message, and he prayed that the man of God come again to teach them what they should do for the child who will be born. The Lord heard Manoah, and he came again to the woman while sitting alone. Then she ran in haste and told her husband, that the man who came to her the other day has just now appeared to her. Therefore, Manoah arose and followed his wife. When he came to the man, he said to him, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" He said, "I am." Manoah asked the Lord, what would be the boy's rule of life, and his work? The Lord answered and said to Manoah, "Of all that I had said to your wife, let her be careful." Judges 13 verses 12 and 13. Manoah took a goat with grain offering and offered it upon the rock to the Lord, for the Lord was not going to eat Manoah's food he had offered him. Therefore, Manoah sacrificed an offering to the Lord, and the Lord did a wondrous thing while Manoah and his wife looked on. It happened as the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. When Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. The Lord accepted the burnt offering and the grain offering from the hand of Manoah and his wife. The angel of the Lord appeared no more to them, and Manoah believed in the Lord. Judges 13 verses 16 to 22. The woman bore a son and called his name Samson. He was born at the beginning of the 11th century BC. The child grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him at Mahanadan between Zorah and Eshtaol. Judges 13 verses 12 and 13. Samson marries a Philistine woman. Samson had an eye for a Philistine woman in Timnah. He asked his father and mother to get her for him as a wife. Samson's parents were not pleased that he wanted to get a woman of the Philistines, for they wanted him to look for a woman among the daughters of his brethren or among their people. Nevertheless, Samson said to his father, "Get her for me, for she pleases me well." However, Samson's father and mother did not know that it was of the Lord, that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines, for the Philistines at this time had dominion over Israel. Judges 14 verses 1 to 4. The Lord appeared no more to them, and Manoah believed in the Lord. Judges 13 verses 16 to 22. Samson's father and mother went down to Timnah and came to the vineyards of Timnah. He did not tell his father or his mother what he had done to a young lion when it came roaring against him. The Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon Samson, and he tore the lion apart as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. Judges 14 verses 5 and 6. Samson went down and talked with the woman of the Philistines, and she pleased him well. After some time, when he returned to get her, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the carcass of the lion. He took some of it in his hands and went along, eating. When he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them, and they ate. However, he did not tell them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. Judges 14 verses 7 and 9. Samson's father went down to the Philistine woman to meet her. Samson gave a feast there, for this was the young men's custom. Moreover, it happened, when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. Then Samson said to them, "Let me pose a riddle to you. If you can correctly solve and explain it to me within the 7 days of the feast, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you will give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing." They said to Samson, "Pose your riddle, that we may hear it." Therefore Samson said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet." Now for 3 days they could not explain the riddle. Judges 14 verses 10 to 14. On the 7th day of the feast, the Philistines said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband that he may explain the riddle to us, or else we will burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us in order to take what is ours? Is that not so?" Then Samson's wife wept on him, and said, "You only hate me. You do not love me. You have posed a riddle to the sons of my people, but you have not explained it to me." Samson said to her, "Look, I have not explained it to my father or my mother, so should I explain it to you?" Now she had wept on him the 7 days while their feast lasted. Therefore it happened on the 7th day that he told her, because she pressed him so much. Then she explained the riddle to the sons of her people. Therefore the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion?" Then Samson said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of their men, took their apparel, and gave the changes of clothing to those who had explained the riddle. Samson went back up to his father's house, for his anger was aroused, because his father-in-law, Timnite, had given his wife to his companion, who had been his best man. Judges 14 verses 15 to 20. Samson defeats the Philistines. 1100 BC. After a while, during the time of wheat harvest, it happened that Samson visited his wife with a present, a young goat. He said, "Let me go into my wife, into her room." However, her father would not permit him to go in. Her father said, "I really thought that you thoroughly hated her, therefore, I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister better than she is? Please, take her instead." Judges 15 verses 1 and 2. Samson was angry, and he said to them, "This time I will be blameless regarding the Philistines if I harm them." Judges 15 verse 3. Then Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and he took torches, turned the foxes tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. When he had set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and burned up the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and olive groves. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" They answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." Therefore, the Philistines came up and burned Samson's wife and his father-in-law with fire. Samson said to them, "Since you would do a thing like this, I will surely take revenge on you, and after that I will cease." Therefore, he attacked them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. Then he went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock of Etam. Judges 15 verses 4 to 8. The Philistines went up and encamped in Judah, and spread out troops forming a front line. Then the men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" They answered, "We have come up to arrest Samson, to do to him as he has done to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Etam, and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines rule over us? What is this you have done to us?" Samson said to them, "As they did to me, so I have done to them." The men of Judah had come down to arrest Samson that they may deliver him into the hand of the Philistines. Samson had them swear that they themselves would not kill him, and they agreed. They tied Samson securely by bounding him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock to deliver him into the Philistines' hands. When Samson came to Lehi, a place in the hill country of Judah, the Philistines were shouting against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it, and killed 1,000 men with it. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey I have slain 1,000 men." Judges 9 to 16. When Samson had finished speaking, he threw the jawbone from his hand, and called that place Ramath-Lehi. He became very thirsty, and cried out to the Lord and said, "You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now should I die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised," speaking of the uncircumcised Philistines? Therefore, God split the hollow place in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank, and his spirit returned, and he revived. Samson judged Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Judges 17 to 20. Samson and Delilah. Samson went to Gaza, one of the 5 major Philistine cities. He met a harlot and went into her. When the Gazites were told that he had come to Gaza, they surrounded the place to lay in wait for him all that night at the gate of the city. The city gates were locked so that no one could enter or leave. All that night they were quiet, for they decided that when morning or daylight came, they were going to kill him. However, Samson lay low until midnight. Then he arose and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two gateposts, pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that faced Hebron. Not even the gates could keep him from escaping. Judges 16 verses 1-3. Samson then went to the valley of Sorek, and loved a woman there named Delilah. Delilah was the third Philistine woman to whom he had a relationship. The lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Entice him, and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver." Delilah began right away to pursue Samson for answers. She said to him, "Please tell me where your great strength lies, and with what you may be bound to afflict you." You would think that by now, Samson will not trust another woman, but he had not learned. He began to play games with the secret of his strength. Samson said to her, "If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, then I will become weak, and be like any other man." Therefore, the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, and she bound him with them. Now men were lying in wait, staying with her in the room, and she said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." However, he broke the bowstring as a strand of yarn breaks when it touches fire. Therefore, the secret of his strength was not known. Judges 16 verses 4-9. Then Delilah said to Samson, "Look, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now, please tell me what you may be bound with." He said to her, "If they bind me securely with new ropes that have never been used, then I will become weak, and be like any other man." Therefore, Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." The men were lying in wait, staying in the room. Nevertheless, Samson broke the ropes off his arms like a thread. Delilah said to Samson, "Until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me what you may be bound with." Then he said to her, "If you weave the 7 locks of my head into the web of the loom," he is now getting closer to telling the secret of his strength. Therefore, she wove his hair tightly with the batten of the loom, and said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." Still, he awoke from his sleep, and pulled out the batten and the web from the loom. Then she said to him, "How can you say, 'I love you,' when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and have not told me where your great strength lies." It happened, when she pestered him daily with her words and pressed him, so that his soul was vexed to death, that he told her all his heart, and said to her, "No razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak, and be like any other man." Judges 16 verses 10-17. Samson spilled the secret of his great strength, for he had a very weak heart for women. He had a sense of pride in his own strength, but a weakness for pagan women to lust after them. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up once more, for he has told me all his heart." Therefore, the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. Then she lulled Samson to sleep on her knees, and called for a man to shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. "Therefore," she said, "the Philistines are upon you, Samson." Then he awoke from his sleep, and said, "I will go out as before, at other times, and shake myself free." However, he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Then the Philistines took him and put out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza. They bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. However, the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaven. Judges 16 verses 18 to 22. Samson's death. The Philistines were worshippers of a false god named Dagon. He was their chief, national god. The Philistines thought Dagon was a god that controls the weather and the fertility of the land. The most popular temples were built for him in Gaza and Ashdod. 1 Samuel 5 verses 5 and 6. Dagon was represented with the face and hands of a man and the tail of a fish. The lords of the Philistines gathered together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their god, and to rejoice, and they said, "Our God has delivered into our hands Samson our enemy." When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, "Our God has delivered into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our land, and the one who multiplied our dead." So it happened, when their hearts were merry, they were drunk, that they said, "Call for Samson, that he may perform for us." Therefore, they called for Samson from the prison, and he performed for them. They stationed him between the pillars. Then Samson said to the lad who held him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars which support the temple, so that I can lean on them." Now the temple was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there, about 3,000 men and women on the roof watching while Samson performed. Then Samson called to the Lord, saying, "O Lord God, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray, just this once, O God, that I may with one blow take vengeance on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars, which supported the temple, and he braced himself against them, one on his right and the other on his left. Then Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Therefore, he pushed with all his might, and the temple fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. Therefore, the dead that he killed at his death were more than he had killed in his life. Judges 16 verses 23 to 30. The Philistines' greatest mistake was in thinking that their god Dagon had delivered Samson into their hands. This false god had no power at all, but the Philistines believed that it delivered Samson into their hands. They offered a great sacrifice to this god, rejoicing, praising, and worshiping the demons behind the idol. The Lord could not allow this blasphemy to go unpunished. Samson allowed himself to be captured and brought into their hands by a woman, but in the end, the Lord had the last word. Samson called upon the Lord for this last time to remember him, that he may avenge the Philistines for putting out his eyes. The Lord answered him, and his request to die with the Philistines, it was granted. At his death, Samson slew more Philistines than when he was alive. Judges 16 verses 21 and 23, 25, 26. Samson's brothers and all his father's household came down and took him, and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father Manoah. Samson was the last of the judges of Israel, and he judged Israel 20 years. The Hebrews. The people of Israel. The Lord used Moses to lay the foundational law and practice on how the Israelites were to worship him. The religion of Egypt had been a threat to them all the while they were in captivity, and now that the children of Israel enters Canaan and takes possession of the land, they encounter the Canaanite religion. They are surrounded by many pagan nations, being exposed to many pagan gods and goddesses, and their many forms of pagan rituals and worship would have a great influence on them while in the land. The Lord had redeemed Israel for himself from Egypt, the nations, and the nations' gods. He had made the people of Israel his very own, and he was their God. Now, the children of Israel live in the midst of many nations, and they failed to get rid of the many gods. There are the gods of Syria, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the people of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines, and they began to adopt many of their practices and at many times worshipped their pagan gods, erecting shrines and altars to them. Judges 10 verse 6. This became an abomination and spiritual idolatry to the one true God, and often angered him for their idolatry. The first and second commandment is, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. Exodus 20 verses 1 to 5. The spiritual decline in Israel began very early in the settlements of their land. During the days of the tribe of the Danite, the tribe Samson is from, when they were seeking an inheritance to dwell in the land, they sent 5 men of their family from the territory of Zorah and Eshtaol, to spy out and search the land of Laish. They went to the mountains of Ephraim and lodged there at the house of Micah. The men coveted after Micah's carved and molded images that he made, coveted after his household gods and the young Levite who became Micah's priest. The men took the carved and molded images of Micah, his household idols, and the Levite priest. The men in turn made him priest over the whole Danite tribe. They then went to Laish, and put the people to the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire, and they rebuilt the city and dwelt there. They called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father. The children of Dan set up for themselves the carved images, and Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. Therefore, they set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Judges 18 verses 27 to 31. Shiloh, a city in the territory of Ephraim, was the first home of the tabernacle after the conquest of Canaan. Civil war broke out between Israel and the tribe of Benjamin. A man and his concubine were passing from Bethlehem in Judah toward the remote mountains of Ephraim, on their way to the house of the Lord. They were about to sleep over in the open square, but a man brought them into his house and gave fodder to the donkeys, and hospitality to the couple. As they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They spoke to the master of the house, saying to the old man, Bring out the man who came to your house, that we may know him carnally. Wow! We have heard this before. What? Sodom and Gomorrah all over again. The old man refused to bring out the man, but instead he sent out his concubine. The perverted men knew her and abused her all night until morning. When the day began to break, they let her go. The concubine made it back as the day was dawning, and she fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was, and was there until it was light. When her master arose in the morning, and opened the doors of the house, and went out to go his way, there was his concubine, fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. She was dead. When he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. Even so, it was that all who saw it said, No such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Judges 19 verses 22 to 30. All the children of Israel came out, from Dan to Beersheba, as well as from the land of Gilead, and the congregation gathered as one man before the Lord at Mizpah. The leaders of all the people, all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. The children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. The children of Israel wanted to know who had done this wicked deed. How did it happen? Therefore, the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, My concubine and I went into Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night, and the men of Gibeah rose against me, and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me, but instead they ravished my concubine so that she died. Therefore, I took hold of my concubine, cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of the inheritance of Israel, because they committed lewdness and outrage in Israel. Look, All of you are children of Israel, give your advice and counsel here and now." Therefore, all the people arose as one man, saying, "None of us will go to his tent, nor will any turn back to his house. But now this is the thing which we will do to Gibeah, we will go up against it by lot. We will take 10 men out of every 1,000, and 1,000 out of every 10,000, to make provisions for the people, that when they come to Gibeah in Benjamin, they may repay all the vileness that they have done in Israel." So, all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, and united together as one man. The children of Israel arose and went up to the house of God to inquire of him, but the Lord allowed the Israelites to lose 40,000 men before he took judgment on the tribe of Benjamin. This could have been for the reason that all the tribes of Israel were not completely walking with the Lord. Israel then came weeping before the Lord, and they fasted that day until evening, and they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So, the children of Israel inquired of the Lord. The ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and they were told to go to battle again, and the Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. Practically a whole tribe was wiped out that day. 18,000 men of the tribe of Benjamin fell that day. Judges, chapters 17 to 21. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Judges 17 verse 6 and 18 verse 1, 21-25. The children of Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Judges 2 verse 7. When all that generation had been gathered to their fathers, or deceased, another generation arose after them who did not know the Lord or the work which he had done for Israel. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, served the Baals and the Ashtoreths, and forsook the Lord. All over Israel, the Lord raised up judges who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them, for he had sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Because of their idolatry and other corruption, the hands of the Lord were against them for calamity, as the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn to them. Judges 2 verses 11 to 15. The Israelites never learned. The Lord raised up judges who delivered them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they would not listen to their judges, and they continued to play the harlot with other gods, and bowed down to them. They turned quickly from the way in which their fathers walked. In obeying the commandments of the Lord, they did not do so. When the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge, for the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who oppressed them and harassed them. Judges 2 verses 16 to 18. Nevertheless, when the judge was dead, they reverted and behaved more corruptly than their fathers behaved by following other gods, to serve them and bow down to them. They did not cease from their own doings or from their stubborn way. Judges 2 verse 19. The Lord was so angry at Israel that he was no longer going to drive out before them any of the nations, which Joshua left when he died. The nations the Lord left that he might test Israel by them were the 5 lords of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites who dwelt in Mount Lebanon. They were left, that the Lord might test Israel by them to know whether they would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. Therefore, the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. They took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and they served their gods. Judges 2 verses 20 to 23. Unfortunately, this was the spiritual condition of Israel on up to the last judge, Samson. The word of the Lord becomes rare after this, and in the latter days, there would be no widespread revelation until the time of Samuel. 1 Samuel 3 verse 1. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Judges 21 verse 25. This is the end of the book Into the Promised Land. The next book in the series will be the fourth book in the series, the Kings of Israel. We will then meet the first 3 kings of Israel. Thank you for listening to Chapter 9 of the book Into the Promised Land from the book series It's All About Worship and To Whom You Worship by Doris and Whaley Smith. The complete book in whole can be purchased on Amazon.com.